Minister Narendra Modi, who, as we all know, is on a two-nation tour to Brunei and Singapore, has landed in Brunei. And this, of course, is a first ever bilateral visit by any Indian Prime Minister. And as a special gesture, Prime Minister Modi has also been received in Brunei by the Crown Prince of Brunei, Haji Al Muttadi Billah. This is what we are learning at the moment. Prime Minister Modi's trip has started today. Remember, this is going to be a two-nation tour. After Brunei, he will be in Singapore. It will be the first bilateral visit by any Indian Prime Minister and will mark 40 years of the establishment of diplomatic ties between India and Brunei. Let's quickly go across to Aman Sharma, who brings us more inputs on this news story. Aman, why is this such a significant visit?
Akanksha, see Prime Minister Modi landing in Brunei Darussalam, and this is the first ever bilateral visit by an Indian Prime Minister to this nation. That in fact makes the trip even more special, and we see that the Prime Minister has been received by the Crown Prince Haji Al Muttadi Billah at the airport, and he will be in the first ever bilateral visit. Is also the celebration of 40 years of diplomatic relations between India and Brunei, and the Prime Minister here will be meeting with His Majesty Sultan Haji Hazamullah Bolkiah and the other esteemed members of the royal family of Brunei, advancing the historical relationship that India has shared with Brunei. The aim is to escalate and elevate this relationship even further. But the fact that the first time an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Brunei is in itself very, very significant. We know this 3-day visit, PM will be spending a day and a half in Brunei before he boards to go ahead to Singapore on September the 4th, where we'll be meeting the Singapore President, Prime Minister and senior ministers, and also interacting with the leaders of Singapore's vibrant business community. So another nation, I would say, and there's been a series of nations, Akanksha, as you know, where the Prime Minister has been visiting. There have been the first bilateral visit by Prime Minister to various nations, or visits after several decades. We saw such a visit to Poland and Ukraine as well recently. So I think a Prime Minister's concerted effort to expand India's diplomatic footprint, and we see him in Brunei Darussalam. He's just landed there.
And interestingly, Aman, both these nations come under Prime Minister Modi's Act East policy, whether it is Brunei or Singapore. So far, Brunei was not one of those nations which were very actively discussed whenever we look at Southeast Asian nations from New Delhi. Having said that, what will be on the table up for discussion, whether it comes to strategic partnership? I'm also being told that defense will also be discussed, as will be people-to-people ties.
Akanksha, Brunei has been an important partner as India's Act East policy, India's vision of Indo-Pacific. So, of course, this visit is aimed at strengthening our cooperation with Brunei in all existing sectors: defense cooperation, trade, investment, energy, space technology, culture, as well as exploring people-to-people exchanges and exploring avenues for cooperation in even newer sectors. India is clearly looking at strengthening the existing cooperation with Brunei. So this visit is very keenly being looked at, and what India can achieve. But at the visit coinciding with the 40th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between India and Brunei, in itself very, very significant, Mr. Modi's visit here.
Aman, we are also learning that India and Brunei are looking towards working on a joint working group in defense sector. How significant is this going to be, considering we've seen how China's clout is only sort of undermining the existing groupings that we are seeing, that also includes perhaps a Quad, and we know that Brunei is not part of the Quad. But how important is it now for India to step up its game whenever it comes to security towards the East?
Well, India has been looking at that sector very, very closely. We know that we have been in a situation with China since 2020 at the border, and of course, both the nations have been trying to impress upon other countries in the region to come on either side. But in fact, India has been trying to build a consensus that territorial integrity is extremely important. And when the Prime Minister is in Brunei today and tomorrow, this India's vision of Indo-Pacific and Act East policy will be strongly discussed between both the sides, and we'll have to wait for exactly which memorandums are actually exchanged between both the sectors. But India clearly would want to strengthen its diplomatic relationship with Brunei in this very significant visit.
Equally important is the Indian diaspora. We are also learning that they're an excited bunch, as is the case with wherever Prime Minister heads. The Indian diaspora is always there to very warmly welcome the Indian Prime Minister. But having said that, what are you learning in terms of an interactive event being hosted by for the Indian diaspora? Is there going to be any interaction between the Prime Minister and the Indian diaspora there?
Well, Akanksha, such visits of the Prime Minister, usually the Indian diaspora will, come to greet the Prime Minister at various events, but not a formal event, we have been told so far in Brunei. But of course, Indian diaspora will be there when the Prime Minister maybe reaches the hotel or at other events. We have seen that in the past also, given the popularity of the Prime Minister. Indian diaspora invariably reaches, the community members reach to greet the Prime Minister. We can expect those scenes in Singapore as well as Brunei during this visit, but no community event as such officially said by the government so far.
And needless to say, India is becoming a power in Southeast Asia. Having said that, how crucial can Brunei prove to be as a partner to India and its plans in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, if you see, the India-Brunei bilateral relations, Akanksha, you will recall that, His Majesty Sultan Haji Bolkiah had paid state visits to India way back in 1992. Again in 2008, he also attended the Asia-India commemorative summits in 2012, 2018, and his last visit, he was also the chief guest for our Republic Day, along with other Asian leaders. Obviously, that relationship goes back in a long way, though it's the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Brunei. But Brunei has, the heads of have paid visits to India in the past. It's a very warm and friendly relationship, how Indian officials have described in the past. Indian diaspora in Brunei is in fact about 14,000 people strong. A substantial number of doctors and teachers in Brunei are also there who have earned, contributed to Brunei's economy and society. So, of course, valuable support from Brunei has also been received by India in our space program. For example, various MOUs have been signed. So, more such cooperation is expected during this particular visit. Brunei remains an important partner for India's Act East policy. So, obviously, India would learn to. Brunei has been a country coordinator in Asia and also from 2012 to 2015. So clearly, India looking at Brunei to play a key role in India's further engagements with ASEAN and the countries as it has been in the past.
And during this third tenure of the Modi government, what's very interesting in terms of foreign policy is a focus on nations which have been neglected perhaps for decades, whether it is Prime Minister focusing on Eastern Europe or, these parts in Southeast Asia, as we can see even in the case of Brunei.
Absolutely, and this is in fact a legacy of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I would put it that way, of visiting nations which have never been visited by Indian Prime Ministers in the past or have been visited decades ago. I remember UAE was the one such visit which the Prime Minister did after many years, and since then Prime Minister Modi has often gone to the UAE. We saw it with this recent Poland and Ukraine visits. Also, Ukraine, the first ever visit. Poland also coming after a long time, over 2 decades ago, an Indian Prime Minister had gone to Poland. There are numerous such nations, over a dozen, I believe, which Prime Minister Modi has. That has been a remarkable point in Prime Minister Modi's tenure, to treat all countries at par and, in fact, emerge as the voice of the global South in a way with these visits.
All right. In fact, the latest Prime Minister over there being the guard of honor as he arrives in Brunei Darussalam, and we all know that he'll be interacting with the Sultan of Brunei, Hassanullah Bolkiah, in some time from now. As Aman has also been highlighting, this is very significant because it's the first time an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Brunei. Let's also listen into what's happening. All right. So important to highlight that this visit spans 2 days. It aims to strengthen bilateral relations and commemorate 40 years of diplomatic ties between India and Brunei. The invitation for this visit comes from Sultan Hassan Al Bolkiah, who is the second longest reigning monarch in the world.